CA students, we all have a love-hate relationship with audit. Some of us hate to study it as a theory subject, but all of us love to go for outstation audits.
I love for going outstation audit. ಒಳ್ಳೊಳ್ಳೆ ರೆಸ್ಟೋರೆಂಟ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ತಿಂದು ತಿರುಗಾಡಿ ಇರೋ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸ್ ಜೊತೆ ಪ್ರಾಫಿಟ್ ಸೇರಿಸಿ ಕ್ಲೇಮ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ.
Harsha, shh, calm down. Everybody knows SA 240 and they'll surely report you.
So, let us begin the second session of the CA Students Mega Conference 2023, Technical Session 2, Audit.
We request the Treasurer of Bengaluru branch of SIRC of ICAI, CA Kavita Parmesh ma'am, to escort the session chairman, CA Jagadeesh sir, and the paper presenters, Tarunika Krishnamurthy, Alankriti Sigatia, and Ayush Lakhotia onto the dais.
Let's give a huge round of applause.
We also request Sumitra Rajpurohit, the Secretary of SICASA Bengaluru, to chair the session as the session coordinator.
We now request CA Kavita Parameshwar ma'am to present them with a bouquet. Thank you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to introduce CA Jagadeesha, a seasoned professional serving as a director within the risk advisory practice at Deloitte. With over 15 years of expertise in risk and controls management, CA Jagadeesha has become a stalwart in various aspects of the field. Having worked and traveled extensively across India and abroad, CA Jagadeesh brings a wealth of global experience to his role.
May we now request CA Jagadeesha, the chairman of this session, to address the gathering and set the context for the session. Please give a huge round of applause for CA Jagadeesh.
Hello, everyone. How was the food? Enjoyed it? Good. I know normally that second half session is very boring, but I think all your same colleagues try to keep you like energetic and then enjoyable. That's what we expect. I think I just want to just give a heads up around that, that I'm not sure how many of you noticed that, our previous colleague, when he presented the contents of the entire details, and then have you guys seen anything like, the organization he projected, and then apart from that, what is that he is more focused on? Have you guys seen anything like typical historical audit kind of thing anywhere here? Or is like, my data is nowhere in the manual books of accounts, like, it's entirely that, going through the technology, digital and all those things, correct? Considering that, I think maybe the way of we are doing the audit and then the way the data, what we get, it entirely differentiate currently. So that's why that, that what normally I think in the current scenario, all of you are like called as Gen Zs. I think maybe that's where like it triggers to that, the way the organization works, the way audit will change. Considering that, I think today's topic is that, one is that primarily the data analytics. How is that, the data, what I look into that today's scenario, it will help me to do further usage of that and like either analytics or like, that how do I get the output of that? That's what the one of the today's topic. And the second topic is that, environmental, social and governance, ESG. How is that, now currently that globally is talked about too much about ESG, and then what is that requirement, and then how is that impact, and then what is the mandatory? That is the second topic. And the third topic is that, auditing standards, okay? That is one of the critical aspects for any of you when you go further and then do audit. And that's where that, this matters to that, what are the standards we need to ensure that, taking care of that critical audits, and then why is that relevant for auditor? With that context, I just ask my other colleague, Tarunika, to start with the audit analytics. Yep, thank you.
Thank you so much for those words of wisdom, sir. Now we have our first paper presenter of the session, Tarunika Krishnamurthy, to present the topic, Audit Analytics, Leverage Big Data for Insights.
Tarunika is a CA finalist who also holds a BCom professional degree from Jain University. She is currently pursuing her articleship in Suraj and Tarun Chartered Accountants firm, Bengaluru. In addition to her professional pursuits, she actively pursues data visualization courses. So audience, give a huge round of applause to the first paper presenter of the session, Tarunika Krishnamurthy.
Not audible? Okay, those who audible, raise your hands. Okay, somewhat. Back rows can't hear me? How are you responding then? Okay, good afternoon everyone. As introduced, I'm Tarunika and I'll be presenting the topic audit analytics, right? So there was a bit of a technical issue here. Anyway, let's ease into it now. How many of you applied for the Tata Tech IPO? Okay, 20%, okay. How many of you got it? Lucky, I don't know. So there are about 3 of my friends who applied and all of them got it. Now, guys, settle down please. I'm not saying I'm a jealous person, but you know, I'm only human. The reason I bring this up is it's all a matter of probability and statistics, right? Now add a little bit of jazz and pep to it and then you get data analytics. That's just about it. Next slide. Okay, so before we start the session, I'd like to know any Tamilians in the gang? Woo! Yeah? Okay. So, Aramikalamma? Okay, so I'd like to set a few expectations. You can see a few points on the slide, but that's not really what I'm here to do today. I'm here to tell you how insanely cool data analytics was once I started pursuing it and tell you that you can too and how this can make all of your jobs much more interesting, right? So, next slide. Let me pitch you a scenario. You have an assignment to consolidate over 5 years worth of data. Now the client sends you this data in a zip folder. You download, you unzip it, and then you see there are like 25 folders, right? And you open each folder and there are like 5 to 6 Excel sheets, and each Excel sheet has 1 to 2 sheets. Now, you curse your fate, and you're like, okay, let's start. Now you Control A, Control C, Control N, Control V. Close the file. Open the next file. Control A, Control C, Control V. Close the file. The third file. Control A, Control C. How long will you do this, right? And to your bad luck, you realize that there was one blank row and you missed all the data after that. Now, this deep regret sets in, right? And that you have to do all of this all over again. You're like, okay, let's save our data. And you click Control S. Microsoft Excel not responding. This is exactly what your brain does, right? So with this deep regret, you're like, okay, let's start all over again. But before that, you attended my session. And now you're like, we can do all of this in a jiffy. Probably not a jiffy, but at least a fraction of the time, right? What if I tell you that there's this incredible tool that you can use that can combine, consolidate, crunch, you imagine it, all of that, and make your dashboard look like this, right? Looks impossible. It looked impossible to me too until I started trying it myself. How many of you here have heard, watched Netflix? Right? Okay. How many of you here watch Friends? The TV show, Friends? Okay. How many of you here watch The Office as a TV show? Okay, few of you, that's great. So Netflix has this thing called top 10 shows in India today. Where do you think they get that data from? Any guesses? Users, right? So from us. We're so used to seeing these balance sheets and P&Ls and, you know, such a third-person neutral point of view, right? We don't realize that we're actually part of some other company's balance sheet and P&L in terms of revenue. We're paying no monthly subscription, 200 rupees, 200 rupees, 200 rupees. Where do you think all of that is going, right? However insanely small our lives look, we're all just small data points in this vast, vast database. So we're still making a difference, one action at a time. The world runs on data. You're just not here to see it. So big data and data analytics, when I started, was an incredibly fancy word to me. I didn't really understand the difference. And I thought more or less everything's the same. Billion, million, what difference does it make, right? So anyone familiar with Byju's? Byju's. The others not familiar with Byju's? Right. So Byju's has this really interesting way of presenting physics, where they have this prism in front of you while teaching 8th grade physics, right? You have this light entering this prism, and you have 7 different colors coming out of it. I'm here to explain, using the same example, what the difference between big data and data analytics is. Imagine that white light coming into this prism as the big data, and the 7 colors that exit the prism as key insights and key performance indicators, right? This prism is exactly the data analytics tool that helps you filter out all the noise coming from this white light and giving you all the insights that you need. Now that we know the difference between big data and data analytics, let's move on and study the different applications of data analytics. Right? Like I mentioned, the world runs on data, and like right now we're drowning in data. Here we're understanding how exactly to make use of it. Okay. So instead of going, I could go on and explain each of these points, but instead I'm just going to narrate a small story. The first thing that you do when you get an audit assigned to you is business understanding. To do this business understanding, you need to know everything you can about the company. And how will you do that without data? You really can't. So let's say you have years worth of historic data, but they're all from different sources, right? You need something to amalgamate all of these sources and bring it to you in a logical, readable, understandable format. Once that's done, you'll have to test the data and get you to a point where you can establish a level of reliability on the data. When you do that, it's really difficult to use traditional sampling methods to do that. These tools will help you increase your sample size and establish a degree of reliance in a fraction of the time. This helps you get a comprehensive view of what the business actually does and increase audit efficiency, primarily because you can cover more audits in less amount of time. So data analytics probably wasn't a big thing before, but now it's popping up everywhere to a point even where ICI gives us e-learning sources about it, right? So why is data analytics so important? Like I said, we're now in an age where we're drowning in data, thirsty for insights, and starved for knowledge, right? So you need some data analytics tool to help you recognize patterns, because recognizing patterns is key. But can you do this all by yourself manually? Not really. You need something that can absolutely surpass human capabilities and produce and help you produce these key performance indicators and tailor your moves so you can achieve your desired goals. Okay, so to summarize what I just said, data analytics tools can help you increase your sample size, enhance the quality of audit, discover patterns, and reduce your risk. Okay, so recently we had this client, this Amazon, Shopify, Meesho, all of these e-commerce platforms, right? We have data coming in from all of those platforms. And if you've seen this data, you know that they're not consistent. You don't have you don't have similar column names. So how do you go about consolidating them to file a GST? You really can't. Even when you're verifying it for audit, it's really difficult, right? But be it any audit procedure, starting from NRV testing, if you're checking sales trends, or whatever it might be, right? Data analytics tools can help you do it in a fraction of time. There's this super amazing tool called Power BI that I'll get to in a few minutes, right? That can help you combine, transform, load data, and easily get those numbers. blah, 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 bunch of repetitive stuff. We have enhanced business understanding. We have better risk assessment. We have consistency in audit. Because now that we've started using these tools, we can establish consistency in terms of audit procedures in all of our audits. This reduces manual intervention. The lesser the manual intervention, the better the accuracy, right? This improves your efficiency and increases your fraud detection. So when your principal's signing the audits that you're doing, much less riskier for them, right? Next. Okay, so some of you mentioned that you do watch Office. There are a few challenges. It looks huge, but it's probably really not, right? So there are a few issues with navigating challenges. All of these seem self-explanatory, but I'm just going to emphasize on a few. Primary issue comes with data privacy and security. You know, when you're in 3rd grade, you don't really tell your friends your secrets until you really trust them. When you do that, companies do that too. So, of course, companies think twice before giving them your confidential data. The second they do give it to you, it's really important to establish storage sources, either in-house or outsourced. With these problems, we also add a layer of audit evidence management. We know that there's a certain statutory limit for maintaining audit evidence. If we do have to maintain that, then we need investment in these storage solutions. Okay, so quickly, let's talk about a few tools. How many of you have heard of Assure AI? Assure AI, anyone? Okay, 1 or 2. How many of you heard of SQL? You don't need to know what it is, SQL. Right. Idea? Power BI. Okay, a lot of you, okay. Okay, so Assure AI is a tool that we use in our firm to, it really helps with risk assessment and verification. SQL can help you. If your client already has a database, it's incredibly easy for you to select and get, extract data from a particular database. Idea, I mean, now we don't have much of time, so I'm not going to discuss it, but let's get a little more into Power BI. This is the most, interesting part of the presentation. Okay, so in Suraj and Tarun, Suraj used to always mention this. Excel is great, but Power BI is like Excel on steroids, right? So it can do a magnificent amount of things. How many of you have seen the Taj Mahal in person? Taj Mahal in person. How many of you have read about the Taj Mahal in social studies? Okay. So the first time I saw the Taj Mahal, I was incredibly awestruck, right? It was nothing as compared to what I'd read in my books. Now it doesn't matter how much I go on and on and on about Power BI because it doesn't literally explain, I cannot possibly explain the magic that it can do unless you try it out for yourself, right? The first time I used Power BI, I absolutely lost it. So let's say you have to get data from multiple sources, you have to transform it, you have to load it and create these incredibly, amazing visuals with your data. It can do all of that for you in minutes or hours, literally. Next slide. Okay, so a small glimpse into the future. Data analytics tools is no longer like an option, but it's become a necessity. It's important to be mindful about the limitations, but also the limitations are far, far less as compared to its pros. Okay, so if all of you have stayed with me till now, I have one thing to say to you. If any part of my presentation appeals to you, I request you to take a picture of this, scan it. I don't know if you have a network in here. Scan it later, because this will help you get into your first baby step towards data analytics. These are the resources that I used to take my first step, and this is what I'm giving to you too. After today's presentation, if even 2 of you download Microsoft Power BI Desktop and try combining even 4 Excel sheets of similar data, then I have won. So I'd like to conclude by saying that data are just summaries of thousands of stories. Tell a few of those stories to help make the data meaningful. Because data is information, and information is power. Thank you so much. You've been a lovely audience.
Thank you, Tarunika, for explaining such a complex topic in such an interesting way.
Now it's time for our second presenter, Alankriti Sigatia, to present the topic ESG Sustainable Auditing. She is a CA final student in the third year of her articleship. Alankriti is currently pursuing her industrial training at RSA Security Application in Bengaluru. She was born and brought up in Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh, and has always excelled academically, being the third city topper in ISC Class 12 and achieving All India rank in CA Foundation. Being a skilled orator, she has exhibited a flair for public speaking by earning several awards in debates and elocution competitions held by ICAI.
Friends, please join me in welcoming on stage Alankriti Sigatia.
Hello. Audible? Audible till the back? Yes? Okay. Thank you so much for the amazing introduction. Just gave it the way I wrote it. Thank you so much. So, audit, audit, audit. I don't like it. I avoid. But ICI likes it. I can't avoid. Actually, okay. So I'm going to speak on the topic ESG, Sustainable Auditing. To start with, I would mention Ankita Roddick, one of the very famous women entrepreneur, who once said, in terms of power and influence, one can forget about church, forget politics. There is no more powerful institution in society than a business. The business of business should not be about money. It should be about responsibility. It should be about public good and not private greed. In today's business landscape, simply focusing on financial performance is not important. ESG is gaining importance because of the increased pressures. Change. Now, the very first thing that comes in our mind is, what is ESG all about? So it stands environment, social, governance. These are the three pillars of ESG framework and the main area where the companies are expected to report in. The goal of ESG is to capture all the non-financial risk and opportunities that are inherent in the company's day-to-day activities. Now, what is included in these three pillars? So for the environment pillar, it includes emissions of greenhouse gases, water and ground pollutions, land use concerns like biodiversity, deforestation, and so on. For the reporting concern, this turns out to be the most complex pillar. Social pillar. Now here basically includes how the company is taking steps for the employee development, labor standards, how it is providing its products to the public or maybe the underprivileged peoples. Governance pillar. This basically includes the stakeholders' right, the board diversity, how are they compensated and whether their compensation is in compliance with the company's strategic performance. Change. The next thing that comes up is how India specifically views ESG compliance. So in 2013, India was the first country to mandate corporate social responsibility in Companies Act 2013. Additionally, top 500 listed companies by market capitalization were directed by SEBI to make disclosures based on the business responsibility reports. Later, in 2021, SEBI further included new circulars and details for environment, social, and governance, where the first top 1,000 listed entities based on market capitalization were required to make the disclosures, and that too in the new format of business responsibilities and sustainability reporting. Now, this reporting was made voluntary for the year 21-22 and thereafter mandated for the following years of 22 and 23. Next. Being a CA student, the next thing that comes in our mind is, what is ESG audit? What is it all about? Why we have to do? So businesses are definitely going to incur cost in some or the other form related to ESG. Correct? Now it depends on how they are ready to present it. It's ESG audit that tells a process that evaluates environmental and social risk relating to the company's operations, products, and services. Next. What is ESG? Why is ESG auditing important? Anyone can tell me the reason other than what is coming in the screen. Think from an article point of view. Why we need to do audit? Why is it important? Doesn't it come to your people's mind when you're doing the audit? Come on, audit fee. Every one of us wants, okay, this is the reason we have to do. Our principal has said we have to do, correct? Okay, now coming to the actual point. So basically, ESG auditing is important because of the investors, the public, the company alike. Nowadays, the customers are focusing on products and goods of those companies which are actually following these guidelines. According to a survey by Nielsen, 9 in 10 millennials will shift their brands or retails if those brands and retails do not support the good cause. And it is through these audits that companies are able to explain how they will be dealing in future with the issues, with the various things and the challenges they are going to face out. And this indirectly affects their share price and even at times the point of which they can earn the fundings. Next. Okay, ESG being the most hot topic, including the subjects related to international reporting and sustainability reporting, and even the cybersecurity comes in play. So the 4 top ESG issues identified in 2023 are as follows. Climate change and sustainability. Sustainability and ESG audit are different, but they significantly overlap each other. Sustainability is more internal, and the organizations are left on their own to define their own definitions, while ESG is more specific and standardized. Even the climate-related changes affect a company to a huge extent. It may include their travel, air expenses, their supply chains, and many more. Second is diversity, equity, inclusion. The companies are held accountable for their actions to attract, recruit, and retain their employees of diverse backgrounds. And especially nowadays, we have to see a huge difference between their pay gaps. There's lack of that transparency that used to be. The next is international regulations expand. EU and UK ESGs have already taken flight. And the organizations that have still not issued ESG reports, especially the public companies, are required to take concerns for the ESG disclosures and committees. Last is combating greenwashing through litigation and regulation. So ESG audit plays a vital role in preventing greenwashing, as they flag out the inappropriate data or the incorrect information found out during the audit process. Next. Okay, now coming to exact what is the audit checklist that we actually follow for ESG audit. So the success of ESG audit depends on the maturity of the organization, the nature of the product and the services rendered, the auditing standards used, and the social context of the company. It tells what the companies are preparing itself to take steps to shut down the risk and to grab the opportunities relevant to its goal. Here the very first thing that comes up is inventory and interview stakeholders. Preparing for an audit involves making stakeholders understand the need for the same, even understanding their needs and trying to fulfill it. The next comes up is incorporate ESG into your overarching risk management plan. So when we plan for a revision of our risk management, we would definitely want to know what is ESG risk and opportunities that are intersecting with other risks. You can take the stock of the ESG risk and opportunities and the stakeholders' answers to even find out the risk that were not identified in the initial procedures. Making a centralized register will help you identify and integrate ESG with the risk management plans. The third comes is determine which compliance requirements overlap with ESG. For example, if your company is already following Sarbanes Oxley, then you already have a financial reporting plan. You already must be reporting to SEC. Thus, integrating climate-related disclosures gives you a relaxation in saving time and energy. The next comes is choose your ESG guidelines framework. So, whether you're doing an internal audit or have appointed a third party for the audit of ESG risk and data, you have to choose one or more frameworks that are relevant to the company and its goal. They should be in aligned with the industry and accordingly giving results that are required for that particular company. Last comes prepare for ESG reporting. So, while preparing for an ESG audit, you should have a plan for its reporting. And it is this report that tells how the company is actually, whether the company is actually giving a true, complete, and a transparent data. Next. So, this comes the ESG disclosures, positive and negative effects. Everyone knows. Negative effect, definitely we have fines and litigations, leads to bad publicity, low company morale. While on the other hand, the positive effects are, it leads to good reputation. It creates a positive media image and even low employee turnovers, as employees are more eager now to work with the company who is complying with such guidelines. Next, CSR. I guess everyone here have heard the word CSR, corporate social responsibility, correct? Now, as you hear this word, you might be thinking, is there any difference between CSR and ESG? So, CSR is basically a process where companies work for social and environmental priorities for the company's operations, strategies, policies. On the other hand, ESG simply takes into account whether the company is actually adhering to the same principles. So, ESG is the way where company demonstrates its commitment towards CSR. Next. So, some of the examples of what can be evaluated in an ESG environment are whether the company is taking proper plan for carbon emissions, whether there has proper recycle or water management, chemical management, how the company is managing its hazardous materials and what is the toxic waste produced and how is it being managed, or what the company is taking for the social issues such as diversity, human rights, labor standards, and so on. Next. Lastly, building on the experiencing companies help us to extract various lessons learned and the best practices that can be used in the audit of ESG. The very first one is establish clear goals and metrics, foster stakeholders' engagements, embrace technology and data analytics, and drive continuous improvement. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a patient listener. Thank you.
Thank you, Alankriti. Such an informative session. Give a huge round of applause to Alankriti Sigatia.
Now we have our final presenter for this session, Ayush Lakhotia, to present the topic, Standards on Auditing. Ayush Lakhotia is a CA finalist, recent graduate, and a prospective CFA Level 1 candidate. He is currently pursuing his articleship at MSKA Associates, a member firm of BDO. He is also the former Vice President of SICASA Speakers Forum, Bengaluru. Without further ado, give a huge round of applause for Ayush Lakhotia.
Check, check. Am I audible? Anybody there? You can listen to me, right? Perfect. Okay, before I start, good afternoon, everyone. All right, you can start the timer. Last night I had a dream. In fact, it was a nightmare. The slides, in my nightmare, my slides were jumbled and my clicker stopped working. So I brought along John to help me with this technological apocalypse. Let me begin with a question. How many of y'all are pursuing your articleship? By a show of hands? Most of y'all, right? How many of you wants to pursue a career in audit? Nice, nice, most of y'all. So this will be like a crash course for all of you and it'll help you crack interviews. Us chartered accountants, prospective chartered accountants, we are masters of law, we know income tax well, we are good at IDT, but what we lacked in the early 2000s was standards in auditing. And that's when ICI brought about standards in auditing as well as quality control measures. So I'd like to begin with, I'll be covering what exactly auditing standards are and why they are important, as well as a brush upon a couple of auditing standards, such as SA 240, SA 315, SA 505, as well as the 700 series. With me so far? Come on, cheer. So what exactly are auditing standards? We have AS for accounting, but when we talk about auditing, which is examining these books of accounts so that we can give an opinion on the same, there is a set framework which we have to adopt so that it helps us in performing these audits. Ashte, simple. AS is basically rules which we have to adhere to in our audit. Next. Now, why are AS important? So they ensure that there is consistency in all these financials, there is uniformity in reporting, and because of quality. It helps auditors identify risks as well as mitigate them. It brings about transparency, and because, well, it is mandated by law. However, the most important reason is to build investor confidence. And that is the reason why AS was brought into picture. So to talk about SA 240, the auditor's responsibilities relating to fraud in the financial statements. What exactly do you mean by fraud? Frauds are basically an intentional act committed by a person to gain an unfair advantage. Yeah, somebody rightly pointed out, Vijay Mallya. Now, what are these types of intentional misstatements? So they're broadly categorized into two. One is performed by the managerial committee and people of the TCWG, the top level management. What they can do is they can fraudulently manipulate the accounts. The other is by misappropriation of assets. This is done by lower level employees who think they're underpaid for the services and they can probably snip a couple of receipts. Wow, did I just describe articles? Who is the responsibility for fraud prevention? It is not the auditor's responsibility. It is the responsibility of the management. We are there for a month or two in the client's place. We cannot be expected to actually eliminate the fraud there. So it is the responsibility of the management. However, then what is the auditor's responsibility? The auditor's responsibility is to ensure that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. Now, what is misstatement? It is basically a mistake, and material misstatement because it can impact the users of the financials. So what are these risks? Which risk do you think is higher for the managerial committee, for the management to commit a fraud or for the employees to commit a fraud? It is the management, right? Because the management is in control of has a control over the controls of the organization, so they can mitigate these. Let's say you are an auditor of a company, you identified a fraud. What do? This is what SA 240 talks about. If the fraud is over 1 crore, then you're supposed to first talk to ensure that you have communicated with the management, and if it is over 1 crore, you're supposed to communicate with the central government as per section 143 subclause 12 of the Companies Act of 2013, which requires us to report to the central government in ADT 4. ADT 1 is for appointment, ADT 2 for removal of the auditor, ADT 3 for the resignation of an auditor, and ADT 4 is where we report this. Talking about the next standard, which is SA 315, it helps us in understanding the organization as well as understanding the risks, and so that we can mitigate them. So, what exactly does SA 315 state? How many of y'all are part, have you, are y'all, I mean, how many of y'all are pursuing your articleship in the internal audit part? So, internal audit has been, this SA 315 governs internal audit as well. It tells us about what risk assessment procedures we can use as an auditor to identify these risks. The partner of my firm usually tells me that before starting an audit, you're supposed to understand the industry in which that audit is to be done. Because how can we examine the books of a company when we can't understand the industry it is operating in? So these components of internal control which are set in place by the management, which are the control environment. How is the control environment in the organization? How does the management take care of the risks, as well as the communication which the management has in place? The other is assessing the risks. How does the management assess all these risks as well as address them? So, and the third is information and communication, wherein how does the company record the transactions, as well as controls to mitigate these risks which come under control activities. The fifth and the foremost is monitoring these controls so that we can eliminate the risk of failure of these controls. As an auditor, we are supposed to use our professional judgment and identify these risks so that we can mitigate them or mitigate them to a level which is fine for us to give our audit opinion. Talking about SA 505, which is my personal favorite, 505, external confirmation. External confirmation basically states that it is us as an auditor, asking a third party without the involvement of the management and confirming the balances at the end of the year. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're auditing a company. In the bank statement, it says that it has 5 lakhs at the end of the year as on 31st March. Now, how do you verify this 5 lakhs? What you do is you send a courier directly to the bank and ask them to confirm whether or not they have 5 lakhs in their accounts. So you sent out 5 lakhs and you wait for the response to come again for 5 lakhs. This is how you can actually remember SA 505. So what are the types of confirmations which you can send? One is a positive confirmation and the other is a negative confirmation. Positive confirmation basically means that you send out a confirmation and you expect whomever you're sending it to reply regardless of them matching it or not. In simple words, it basically means that even if it is 5 lakhs or 450 or whatever it is, you expect them to reply back. With respect to negative confirmation, it is only when the client disagrees will they have to reply back. Artha aita? So here, if the management pokes their nose and doesn't let you send these confirmations in a fair manner, then you have to be very cognizant of the fact that the confirmations could be tampered with. A lot of us have spoken about the Satyam scam, which is the Enron scandal of India, in which the auditors, a reputed audit firm, could not identify these issues because they failed to adhere to the standards of auditing, especially 505 and 315, wherein they were supposed to identify risks and mitigate them to a reasonably low level. SA 505 is of relevance here because had the auditors sent the confirmation to the bank, they would have realized that whatever money the company is claiming to have, they would have realized that, that the company doesn't have it. And this led to 2 of the auditors going to jail. Do you understand the significance of the matter here? Imagine you as an auditor, and just because of your negligence, you go to jail. You should realize that audit is a risky profession. Now coming to the 700 series, probably the most important series in audit, and this was actually a question which my partner asked in my interview. Describe the 700 series. Give me the opinions which an auditor can give. And to start about, 700 series is basically an auditor fulfilling his duty to give an opinion on the financial statements. I'll divide it into 2 halves. First half is when the auditor obtains sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. The other half is when the auditor does not obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. If he obtains, say, E, then there are again two halves. He identifies the misstatements, but they are not material. Then he gives clean report. Okay? And if he identifies the misstatements and they are material, but not pervasive. Now, what does pervasive mean? It is basically that it is spread throughout the financials. If it is material but not pervasive, then he gives a qualified opinion. But if it is material and pervasive, then everything is wrong with the audit. He gives an adverse opinion. In the second half, where he doesn't obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, again it is divided into two. The first half is when no say, as well as but the misstatements are material but not pervasive, then again qualified opinion. And if they are material but pervasive, then he gives a disclaimer of an opinion. Bear with me, this is a little technical, but it is instrumental in your success. So SA 700 gives us the elements of an audit report. How many of you all have seen an audit report? Nice, nice. So SA 705, this is with respect to modification of an audit report. I already covered how you can modify these audit reports. So I'll move forward. And the content of a modified report, you'll see it in the next slide. So this is Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone Limited, annual report of 22-23. Deloitte resigned by giving a qualified opinion which stated, and the reason they gave a qualified opinion was because of the Hindenburg issue, the issues which the Hindenburg report brought forward, wherein there were a lot of related party transactions which Deloitte couldn't identify, since Deloitte was not auditing those related parties. Now coming to SA 701, this is with respect to key audit matters in the independent auditor's report. If the auditor wants the users of the financials to pinpoint at one particular FSA, because the auditor thinks that that is important for the user, then he writes it in the key audit matter. There are over 3,000 listed companies. Imagine, as a user of the financials, you want to invest in something. You can't read the entire annual report time and again. However, you can look at the key audit matter and probably pinpoint at that particular place. This is the only reason SA 701 is in existence. It is not a separate opinion, remember, and the auditor it is not a substitute for modified opinion either. Let me give you an example of a key audit matter. This is with respect to Marksans Pharma and Limited, annual report of 21-22. In this, the key audit matter was with respect to 2,300 odd millions lying in the subsidiaries of Marksans and Pharma. Now, how could the auditor identify, how could the auditor recalculate the amount? So that is the reason it pointed it out, stating that since management estimate is involved here because of future cash flows, because that's how valuation is done with respect to the DCF model, and that's why this is an example of a key audit matter. The last is SA 706, which is with respect to Shilchar Technologies, and it points out at how much amount was left as managerial remuneration which is paid to the director. So it just wanted the users of the financials to actually be cognizant of the fact that this much amount is being paid to the director as remuneration. What I would like to end it with is that all of you should actually read the annual reports, because they are gold mines when it comes to investing. And when it comes to investing, India is set to be a $5 trillion economy by 27-28. All of you should take part in this, because I was listening to a quote by a VC fund manager who said that the best investment is in yourself, because he can never guarantee the returns to a startup founder who probably got a 2,000 plus return on his capital. When that person comes to his fund to manage the money, he can never guarantee that 2,000% return he gets, because the best investment will be in yourself. I want all of you to actually read these gold mines of reports which companies across the world give out, and you can use this website called screener.com to filter out these annual reports. Signing off, Ayush Lakhotia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ayush, for such an interesting and interactive session.
After we got such a deep understanding of the topics like audit analytics, ESG, and standards, we now request CA Jagadeesh sir, the chairman of the session, to conclude the session with his closing remarks.
First of all, I would like to thank all the three panelists, like, the energy, the way they articulated, and then this is like, it motivates all of you. I assume that, I think the way they done that very well, fantastic. I think then maybe all of you need to look into that. I know some of you, like, by morning already got bored and then like had a nice lunch and then like, thinking that, this is like, for me, like, just you need to recap that, I just want to give just request all of you that, think through that, these topics is like, what is in it for me, okay? Maybe I just quickly, I'll take 1 minute to spend that, the first part, the data analytics, because the way the audit, the way you guys do audit, it over a period, it will going to change. No way that going to be in the, like, take a pen, tick mark and all those things, that's not the case, okay? So when I don't have a manual physical books to audit, end of the day, I need to rely on the technology and then I need to learn new technology, how the analytics works, how the data works. That's one of the key area I just thought of, like, it needs to be looked into that, all of you guys. The second one is ESG, like, maybe that I'll put in a different angle that, not only financial audit is critical, nowadays that, even that as per the regulatory requirement, ESG is also one of the critical audit. That's why you guys have to look into that, how is that new new regulation, new implementation, whatever comes to you guys, maybe that's relevant and then that's how you look into that. And then the third topic, what I can see is that, maybe the way the auditor has looked is differently now. There's no way they'd only look at the way you just do typically that, basic closing books are like, that's not the case. Maybe that lot of responsibilities there. Then I don't know how many of you heard NEFRA. How many of you heard of this word NEFRA? See, is that our friend or is it our enemy? Why? Because see, that's why they're looking into, correct? So it's not an enemy, it's not a friend, because that's what makes you that, they are trying to tell you that, boss, your responsibility is this. You need to work accordingly and then do that, okay? Kind of, that's why that is the last topic is very relevant. With that, I think all of you just, wish you all the best and then keep learning. Learning is one of the key essential for all of you, okay? Thank you everyone, okay? Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. We now request CA Kavita Parmesh to present the mementos to the session chairman and all the paper presenters.
Give a huge round of applause to CA Jagadeesh sir.
Give a huge round of applause for Ayush Lakhotia.
Tarunika Krishnamurthy.
Alankriti Sigatia.
We now request Vinayak Sheth, the Special Event Coordinator of SICASA, Bengaluru, to deliver vote of thanks.
We express the profound gratitude to the session chairman CA Jagadeesh and the paper presenter Tarunika Krishnamurthy and Alankriti Sigatia and Ayush Lakhotia. On behalf of everyone here, we thank CA Jagadeesh on your time and insight the valuable session you have shared with us today. The paper presenters, with the brilliant presentation, give us to the deeper understanding of audit. Thank you to the audience who have been extremely patient and interactive with throughout the day, and thank you everyone.
With this, we come to an end of technical session 2.
I'm Harsha HL.
I'm Apeksha Pai, signing
Signing off.